I remember the execs coming to me and they said, I didn't understand much, but thank you for your passion. I had such a belief that I was passing that belief without really needing to explain the how. This is the vanity metrics. How much I raised, or why is my head count? All of that is great, but it has to come with other metrics. But in UK, in the social public sector, it is price sensitive, and it has been for some time. So, and that forces you to find ways to deliver that value at the lowest possible cost.
Hey everybody, in this episode, you are going to hear all about how Harry Lykostratis has built an enormous health tech company without raising a single penny. He has bootstrapped his way to a tech company that sells to international healthcare systems and has done incredibly well. You're going to learn a brand new way of thinking about raising money. And that's not to say raising money is a bad thing, but bootstrapping can also be a very good thing. It can be a great thing for culture. It can be a great thing for efficiency mindset. It can actually be a great thing for an innovative mindset too. There's so much in this information. There are so many insights. Harry is a really fascinating founder with a great story. Listen to this episode and you will definitely be better off whether you are raising money or not. Hey everybody, this week I am joined by Harry Lykostratis, and he is a highly skilled and innovative software developer and practicing orthopaedic surgeon. So he has merged his extensive background in healthcare within the NHS with a passion for software engineering to lead the development of Pathpoint, an interoperable digital system for workflow management. Startup founder with excellent interpersonal, collaborative and organizational skills. You can tell you wrote this yourself, Harry. Keen interest in all things digital, specifically designing effective and safe care pathways, data analysis and AI. So basically solving workflow for healthcare. And obviously AI is in there. So looking forward to talking about that with you. But Harry, welcome to the Healthtech Podcast, mate. How you doing?
I'm very well. Thank you, James. And thank you for having me. That is a great introduction. And no, it wasn't me. It was the marketing team that wrote it.
You can definitely tell it's a marketing team. Highly skilled.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I usually sort of say, well, I mean, I'm a doctor, but sometimes I code, but these days I code and sometimes I'm a doctor. So I have both hats.
Very nice. Very nice. Whereabouts are you speaking to us from today, Harry? Where are you based?
So we are based at Ealing. We have 2 floors at sort of Uxbridge Road. We've been here 3 years, I think. We had a sort of a co-op workspace before when we were 5 people, or less than 10 rather. And when we started, we had our homes. So
nice.
But we're sort of getting comfortable here now at Ealing, and we might move. So there's some ideas floating around, but currently sort of works out. It takes me an hour to get here because I live in Barnet, but otherwise it's sort of 7th and 9th floor. We can get the 8th floor, but it's good cardio, going up this. I'm now on the 9th floor. I've got a great view of the whole, town.
Very nice. And leading the way as a health tech founder with a standing desk, doing cardio on the 9th floor. It's great. And less than 10 people 3 years ago. And now you've got 2 floors of a building. So that says a little bit of something about your growth. But mate, looking forward to getting into this. Obviously, you and I, we met at, we've met a few times actually. We did an event a long time ago, but we re-met in Malta and we were having what was a lovely and interesting conversation. It was actually between you, me, and Nadeem, the founder of Flow with a PH, about VC funded versus bootstrapped companies. You obviously famously being a bootstrapped health tech company, which is a fascinating concept, and Nadeem obviously being venture funded and all the rest of it. Yeah, great conversation and looking forward to getting into some of that with you on this. But before we do, I want to get the background on who you are, where you've come from, what your story is, and what leads you to founding a bootstrapped health tech company. So yeah, why don't you start at the beginning, mate, and tell us all about it?
Yeah, will do. So it is a bit of a long story, and ties into the standing desk and being 40 plus now. So it started when I was quite young, and it's one of these strange sort of stories, really. So when I was, I think, around 11, a good friend of mine at the time, his dad got him an Amstrad 6128, and I loved it. I mean, I went around and he was hooking up to the TV, and I think it had 8 different colors and 240 pixels horizontally. It was great, and I started sort of lobbying my dad. That is quite suburban, or rather rural, let's call it rural, really, Greece at the north, nothing too exciting. So I was lobbying for an Amstrad 128. And he eventually, around Christmas, he went to a computer shop and he got me a PC. And this is 88. So he got me a PC, an 8186. And the original IBM PC with a sort of black and white monitor and a big 5.25-inch diskette and no hard disk. And they given me a sort of a floppy diskette of MS-DOS 2, I think.
Nice.
And I was devastated, James. Yeah, I hated it. And, I wanted that Amstrad because I wanted to play games. I mean, I was 11, and I really was quite angry with my dad at the time, and I kept saying, how my friend's dad was, a better dad. What I didn't know at the time, 11, and and this is sort of the sort of darker side of that story, is that my friend's dad was diagnosed. And he had very poor prognosis with his pancreas. And that would have been the last birthday that he would spend with his son. And that's how he got him the Amstrad. So I didn't know that. I mean, you don't know these things when you're 11. So I was, I sort of took a different position. I was just upset because, frankly, a 8086 PC with MS-DOS is no useful to an 11-year-old child. So I didn't touch it. I mean, I left it in the box for about a week, and it was around the Christmas holidays. And at some point, I decided to sort of give it a go. I took it out, I plugged it in. I didn't know what I was doing. So eventually, I managed to put the diskette in and boot it. And then I was greeted with that, with a A letter, not even C, A for the floppy, and I didn't know what to do. So I went to the library. I did find a book on MS-DOS 1 at the school library. So I found how to sort of list a directory and see the contents of the file, and I mean, within a week you figure out the 10 MS-DOS commands, and that's that. But there was MS-DOS at the time was coming with a Pascal compiler, and it had a couple of examples of Pascal programs. So I started getting into that, and I started getting interested, and I started not wanting to play the Amstrad 6128 games anymore, and I wanted to program more. The bigger problem at the time was finding resources and how to order books. That was all sort of coming from the States, and I had to wait weeks for the books to arrive. Eventually, a year later, I got myself a modem, and I would dial into sort of bulletin boards, where it's a funny thing. It wasn't like a normal ISP, so you would dial a random number, very expensive, because all of that was sort of dialing the stage. So you have to be quite quick with it. And I would dial into the bullet board and I would post a question and someone would send me an example of the program.
Yeah.
And that's how I started. That's how I got into programming. And I've kept on programming since that age, and I moved on from Pascal, obviously. I did C, I did Python. Well, I guess everybody has done Python. I've done most. I've done Node and a lot of programming languages. So I've seen the development of that over the years. Eventually, I ended up doing my exams and getting a place in med school in Athens, and I took a year out to travel. So I did travel around, and I traveled to Manchester eventually as part of my sort of European tour. And I sort of liked it, and I applied to the universities here, and I got a place, and I started medical school. All the while, I was still programming in the background, but that was my personal sort of hobby, essentially. I never really used it until I was a registrar, and I can get into sort of how Pathpoint started a little bit. So I was a registrar at London North West, and I think this is a story that most people do know. And I was in orthopaedics, and it was a weekend, and we used to have a big whiteboard where we would write the trauma list, essentially. This is the list of people waiting for an operation. Some of them would be inside the hospital, and some of them would be at home. And we have to sort of keep track. And they're all hot cases that you're getting through A&E. When the clinic came into the trauma room, wiped off the board, we couldn't reconstruct the list, and we sort of wasted the full day. And I thought at the time there must be a better way of doing that. So I started writing a little sort of app, which at the time I called e-trauma, because, obviously I didn't have a marketing team, so that was all I could think about. And I installed it, and people liked it, and we started using it. And then as people were rotating around, they saw value. And they started asking me to sort of install it in other places. So I ended up installing in 4 places. And then people were asking for changes, and they're asking for a bit more. And I found myself essentially spending every single weekend going around hospitals installing updates, because it was all sort of hosted within the hospital. There was no company or infrastructure. And when the 5th sort of person started pushing, I started saying, I'm sorry, I can't keep scaling this app. And we decided to sort of make a company, and we did, and that is in 2013. So we did make a company, but nothing happened over. And obviously, I was full-time trainee, and I was doing orthopedics. And at some point, in 2015, I thought there were enough requests and enough sort of people asking for that. So I thought I will start rewriting it. So I had enough feedback at the time. So I wrote a essentially clinical data engine, and we're still using that today. We call it a data biotic engine. Which is a back-end, essentially, piece of code written in C, and very scalable and high performance. I'm not going to get a bit too technical, which I tend to, but and essentially it took me almost 2 or 3 years. So in 2018, I spent most of the later half of 2017 converting the existing e-trauma installations to Pathpoint installations. 2018 we booked a 1x1 square at BOA at Birmingham, and we had quite good reception there and a lot of support from the orthopedic community. And I guess the rest is history. After that, we sort of monetized existing installations, and we started with our sort of trauma product, and we went from there. And now we do way more than trauma. I think we platformized it to what we now call Pathpoint. Still using the same sort of background storage, the databiotic storage engine that we do maintain. We keep making better, but it has been proven to be a very resilient piece of technology. And that is the long elevator.
It's very nice. It's a lovely story. What I like about it is that ultimately it sounds like you just coded something to solve your own problem. And actually that means that the problem that you end up solving is meaningful because it was meaningful to you. You were trying to do the job. You could have done the job better with something. You built that something, and then you became something that I've heard a couple of times actually on this podcast, which is an accidental entrepreneur. You sort of didn't want to scale it. You weren't thinking of the company first. You didn't have the motive of, I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to build a company. I want to employ people to do a tech thing. I want to you didn't have any of that. Like, you weren't being drawn from the world of startups into this. You're sort of from healthcare for healthcare, aren't you? You're a clinician that happens to code. You could see a problem and a solution. And I talk about this a lot. Like, if you have two skill sets, you can often see not only the problem, but the solution, especially if that other skill set is coding or computer science. So you saw that, and actually you just went ahead and thought, well, do you know what? I'm going to build it and solve my own problem. And actually, hey, this solves a problem for other people. I'm going to do that out of the goodness of my heart. I'm going to go round and I'm going to do updates for people, and I'm going to try and scale it. And then you're like, oh, should someone buy it? And da, da, da. I think that's a really interesting journey, because a lot of people I see from this, Daffyd from Concentric, I don't know if you know Concentric, but sort of electronic consent.
I do, yeah.
Yeah. So same story, like the accidental entrepreneur that basically solved his own problem with something that's slightly more than a quality improvement project, or arguably just a very good quality improvement project that actually delivered something, that actually delivered a change. And then it's like, well, hey, I could sell this, but should I sell this? And da-da-da. Talk to me about that. So I'm interested now in this bit of, like, you've solved your own problem with a bit of tech. Other people now want it, so you've got demand. But at this point, you've got no entrepreneurship experience. You've never done a business before. You've never sold anything before. You never set up a limited company or a bank account or any of these things. How did you go from being an orthopaedic registrar to a CEO? That's a heck of a leap, right?
It is, and is not easy. And I think you make a lot of mistakes along the way, and sometimes expensive mistakes. And you feel constrained at all times. I think this is something that I don't think a lot of people talk about, but for at least my journey, I as you said, I never really intended to do business. It was very hard for me to talk to people, and it took me more than a year before I could actually say a price.
Yeah.
And you're battling with yourself, with your own instincts in many ways. And because medicine is vocational, and you sort of do it and you get paid by the organization you're working at, but it's never transactional. And I think that ethos is sort of instilled into you as a doctor. So I think the bigger difficulty, there are the logistical difficulties that you sort of ask and learn and experiment. But to me, the bigger barrier was myself, and how can I now sort of switch? It's quite interesting to me because you don't have salesmanship. So, and I remember when we came out with, this is a bit of a parenthesis, I'll get back to the answer, but I remember when we were pitching a teledermatology solution back in, I think, 2019, and I had a big audience, and some of the executive team was there, and I presented the solution. I presented the model, the pathway, how we can optimize and control the traffic of high volume cases with existing resources. And at the end, I think the dermatologists understood it because that is what they do. But I wasn't sure that the execs did, because, workflow and clinical operations sometimes can come down, to the weeds. But I remember the execs coming to me and they said, I didn't understand much, but thank you for your passion. And I think this is how I was essentially making up for my lack of experience in salesmanship. I had that absolute belief that the way forward in a constrained organization and is to manage traffic as efficiently as possible by deduplicating actions, by utilizing every person at the maximum. And I had such a belief that I was passing that belief without really needing to explain the how. And I think that is common to entrepreneurships. The passion is something that most people do share. And closing that parenthesis, that's how the initial growth has happened. And for me, the personal growth was mostly around seeing myself as something else. And it is something else. And I think, there are times in that journey, and as you grow and as you create revenue and responsibilities and workforce and, in some cases, investors, you might have conflicting agendas. You have a lot more stakeholders. It was comfortable before. My stakeholder was the trust, the patient, and the specialty. I could live with that, and I could find a way to operate in that environment that, I would bring value to all three. And, well, now it's different. Now the customer is an important stakeholder, and, at our current sort of footprint, arguably local government or more than that is a stakeholder. Society starts to become a stakeholder. The employees are a stakeholder. So in some cases, you have to reconcile those agendas that they don't always align. And I think this is the personal journey as an entrepreneur. How do you switch from being in my case, a doctor that is vocationally driven and, an engineer that is quite pragmatic, to someone that I have to lead and I have to insist on value exchange to hospitals and health providers, which, and I think this is, at least to me, that was the burden I felt.
Yeah.
And there was the logistics. And the logistics, you saw, initially, I had a good accountant who also set up my articles association. And, I didn't know what procurement was. I didn't know that doing business with the public sector could be so complicated. I was still a little bit. I was still a little bit naive, as in I will give you a thing that gives you value and you have to give me some of that value back so I can keep doing what I'm doing. So I found all that out slowly and organically by making a lot of mistakes.
I think the identity management bit is a really interesting point. I relate to it very, very much. And I've seen and heard this explained in a few different ways. I think for medics, it's really difficult to make that identity management possible because you're going from this very, frankly, socialist environment of a hospital and communist environment almost of like, everything is shared, that there is no individual, there's no I in team, like, everything's for the good of for everyone else. Like, I sacrifice how I feel for the benefit of others. Like, it's a very giving environment to, as you say, a very capitalist environment of transactions and value exchange. And you give me this and I get that. Like, it's very two-way, and you have to talk about money. And God, that is uncomfortable, isn't it? Like, we've never had to do that before, because we just turn up to our vocation and we get money in our bank account every month, and we don't have to talk about money beyond that. And we certainly don't have to talk about you giving me some for something that I do, and negotiating that, and that being actually okay, and all those things. I think that's incredibly difficult for anyone in healthcare to do. And so I definitely relate to you on that. The other bit that I think I relate to you on is how much entrepreneurship is actually about people and emotions as well. And I'm seeing this more and more with AI coming in, and thinking, what can AI do? How can AI take over so many functions in my business? How can AI replace a lot of the things that I do as a CEO? Actually can't do a great deal. Like, it actually can't do a lot, because so much of my job is being a person and talking to or communicating with, in some way, other people. And actually, like you pointed out, doing those deals and those conversations, all those things, like, it's so people orientated. And actually, that identity management piece first, to actually then figure out a way of, how do I become comfortable with myself again? Like, what is the definition of me as an entrepreneur? Like, why am I doing this? What's my why? Like, can I build that as part of my story? Can I now say I'm a doctor, and I'm a surgeon, and an engineer, an entrepreneur, a business, a tech dude, like whatever you want to call it, right? But becoming comfortable with that first has to be the first step, because you can't really do much else, especially in the early days, because being an entrepreneur is so much about being a person in that, and communicating who you are and what you're about. Because otherwise, to your point about your story, like, you can't give them that passion. You can't give them that passion if you're not sitting comfortably with yourself. And actually, you found it as a way of being comfortable with yourself, which is really interesting, actually, that the way that you turned that around, or definitely what put you on that journey of identification and re-identification with yourself, was actually just communicating what you're passionate about, of like, hey, I am a surgeon, I am super passionate about this. Like, this is something that I think could help. This is why it could help, blah, blah, blah. And having as quick a possible conversation about money as possible, probably right at the end. But yeah, it definitely seems like the way you did it, right?
Absolutely. And I think in many ways, I think this probably explains the organic journey as well, right? Because it is about giving. And I think, so the organic growth, it has in some ways enforced that exchange, that we should value what we give to the customer. We should value what we give to the market. And I think it is a bit of a remnant of the vocational part of our origin. And I'm not saying that there is no benefit in getting investment, but certainly at the very beginning, I found that it is about giving. It is about creating value. And I did not want to be distracted from that. And I think that has allowed us to sort of 120% growth year on year, since we are created. And that is on footprint and revenue and remain profitable, right? So remain profitable and have the market and the clients fund that growth. And it did force us to operate under constraints. And I think in many ways it's like how the whole thing started, right? I mean, the need is what sort of gives birth to innovation. Constraint is valuable because we knew that this is the resources we had so far from the market, and that is what the market values us. How can we give more value out so the market will recognize that? How can we make our costs lower? And I think that sort of gave us, it created innovation. It created innovation to our business model, to the way we operate, to how we distribute resources, how we prioritize. And it certainly helped into always be focused.
Yeah.
We knew from, at the very beginning that if we want to grow, we need to put out a solution that people are willing to pay for. And we have to compete with companies that are well-funded and giving out freebies. And that sometimes can be a difficult deal to make. You can buy my solution that you have to pay for, or you can get a free pilot for a year from a solution that you don't have to pay for anything for. And NHS being quite a price-sensitive market, it is sometimes not an easy argument to make. So we have to be giving more and more and give the value to that extent that it makes the competition not worth sometimes even when it's free. It is an aggressive approach, but what you're forced to do. And I think it is about the focus on providing that value. And look, I'm certainly not saying that investment, and if we had investment, it would have helped. It would. It would have made a lot of harder decisions a lot easier decisions. Doesn't mean we would have, doesn't mean that by having less of a constraint, we would have innovated less. Not necessarily. But I think in a way, it forced us to do it, if that makes sense. We did not have an option.
It does. Yeah.
And I think this is the learning for me in business. And I do understand that this is probably the outline position or the outline journey, although it might not be as outlined now with the current interest rates, but that's a different discussion, I'm guessing.
Indeed, yeah, let's.
But at the time, I mean, money was cheap. So you could invest into your potential future earnings, and, well, you had an interest next to zero on those earnings in the future. So, it was a sort of a mitigated risk as an investment. I don't think it's the case anymore. Hopefully will change again. This is, in a way, I think our organic growth so far can be explained a little bit from that origin. Because he accidentally started, and then, the market it was the market appetite that pulled us, and then we leveraged that appetite as a source of funding.
So it sounds like what you're talking about there is that organic growth strategy and feeling resource constrained definitely gave you discipline. It definitely put you into, well, an efficiency mindset in terms of cutting costs, but actually an innovative mindset, conversely, in, I guess, finding those efficiencies or finding different ways to do things that would make you better off in the long term. So that's quite interesting.
Yes, I'll give you an example. I think it's a good example. So one of the things we figured out early is, okay, we have a platform we're now building products on, and, for different, from health record to workflow, mainly around sort of operational and clinical pathways. But we felt that we need to have that competitive advantage, and that is the customization. We wanted to make the solution to be service-led. We didn't want the technology to essentially change the way you work. We wanted the service, what the service needs, we need to deliver that as a technology. So we created that flexibility around the platform. Well, that creates cost because now I cannot just give you a solution and then invoice you and then walk away. I now have to implement. I have to deploy. I have to project manage. I have to do consultation. I have to take on part of your transformation journey. So that gives us the advantage, but creates a cost. And now this is a cost that somehow we need to absorb. And in a price-sensitive market, in a few other countries we're now operating, they're more value-sensitive. So it's a lot easier and a different approach. But in UK, in the social public sector, it is price-sensitive, and it has been for some time. So we cannot just increase the price to now give you that, because we still need to remain competitive. And that forces you to find ways to deliver that value at the lowest possible cost. Yeah. And I think this is a decision, and this is this sort of way of this playbook would not have been developed if we could just, if we could be non-profitable.
Yeah, it's crazy.
If we could culture, say, isn't it? Well, I mean, yeah, we can be on a negative cash flow because, I've got a capital sort of account with a lot of funds raised. So he arguably would have stopped the innovation on the business side.
Yeah.
I think that might be an example of illustrating that sometimes the constraint allows you to find ways to be lean and deliver maximum value while you find ways to streamline it and do it in a way that it allows you to still remain profitable at the end of the month.
Yeah. I think what's really inspiring to me and others here is like your evidence that it's doable, your evidence that it's possible to build a tech company in healthcare, sell to NHS audiences and now many others, build a company of value, and basically your evidence that it's possible, right? But you did say, and you're an outlier. Like by definition, you are an outlier. This is not the norm. It's not the normal way things are done. So, and you said money was cheap at the time, especially in the early days, like of building this. Like, so you could have taken on debt or equity or whatever. So my question is, why? My question is, why were you organic growth and not taking investment? And I get that the benefits downstream you've talked about are this culture now of being able to solve complex problems when it comes to price sensitive versus, quality sensitive markets and all that sort of stuff. And there's definitely a culture that's been created in the company due to that constraint that's always been put on there. I can imagine it's been tempting at times, and it might even be tempting now to raise money to do different things, especially now once you've got that mindset. And you can probably take on money because you can get it at a much better valuation, all those things. You're probably much better set in terms of a team to now bring that money in and be very capital efficient with it. So that's definitely a benefit as well. But it's obviously not a luxury that's afforded to very many, because I suppose they have to raise money to maybe get ahead in the market or to build that product with all its features that are needed up front. And as you say, to compete in a price sensitive market, they can perhaps raise money and offset that against literally the cost of the product. So I guess why and how might be the two questions here, in terms of why were you not taking on money, and how did you manage to not take on money and remain so competitive? I know you've given a lot of that answer already in terms of your culture, but yeah, talk to me about that.
First of all, what I need to say, about the outlier, I also need to because sometimes, that appears to, it can appear very biased, and, the reality is you need the right circumstances. And essentially, and this is why I understand why it is an outlying position, because you need essentially, as I see it now, looking back, three things. One, you need to have access. And I had access. I was in healthcare.
Yeah.
I had access in how people think. I had access into these organizations. And this is arguably something of an advantage when you start from a health professional background.
Because it's expensive information. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that is the first, that is shared with a lot of people today and at the time. The second thing is I was an engineer.
Yeah.
I could absorb the product cost. And that is not easy. The sales cycle in this industry, it can be a year. If you have to maintain an engineering team of 5 for a year, well, someone has to pay for that. It gets easier as you get momentum. But the very beginning, well, all you have is an idea without implementation, is enterprise. They will not just go for it. And so I could absorb a cost that a lot of people cannot. And the third time, it was the right time. I was earlier. It was before a lot of the sort of, a lot of the current sort of trend of entrepreneurship sort of come about, or at the early stages of. And that essentially made it a little bit easier. There was arguably less competition. There was arguably less scrutiny into credibility, which no one has when they start. So the circumstances allowed us to be an outlier. I'm not necessarily convinced that this can be reliably repeated and be a way. So I want to put that out there, that sometimes you just have to get lucky in entrepreneurial journeys, and you need to have everything aligned with your access, with the cost absorbing mechanism already in place, and be at the right place at the right time. And we were sort of there. So on your questions about sort of organic growth, over the years we realized that the health tech is a conservative industry. It is. There's a long sales cycle. It's enterprise, and it has to do with implementation and proof more than anything. And I'm not quite sure that the bleed scaling tactic that is sort of common in a sort of more consumer market, it works. And there is a little bit of, look, I mean, if I was a consumer and there is a new, let's say, taxi riding app, which is well funded, it does not have to be profitable, and is giving me a lot of freebies, yeah, I'll go for it. I do know that eventually I will be hit with a price hike, a reduction on my benefits, a probably, meaningless warranty, good chance of a discontinued service. But at that point, I will just switch to the next well-funded taxi riding and get advantage of that. But enterprise cannot do that. The cost of change is the biggest cost an enterprise has. You cannot, as an enterprise, jump on a solution that it might be a flash in the pan. This solution, you might end up with ghostware, unmaintained software, or an unmaintained service because the interest rates are now high and your runway runs out. So I think bleed scaling does not have the network effect. Enterprise does not have the network effect that bleed scaling is reliant on, and it does not have the attitude towards credibility that the consumer has. The consumer can switch. The enterprise cannot. They need to be certain they're investing into long-lasting solutions. So this is one of the reasons that I felt that fundraising would not be at the interest of the market and the consumer. I think I would put my clients at risk.
Interesting.
Because I would not be confident enough that I will be here in 2033 providing that service that you're relying on. Because now I can. So I think that is the first reason. The second reason is I think you have to prove that you're basing everything around creating value. As an entrepreneur, it is about creating value. And I think you need to create that value not only for the market, but for the investor as well. And sometimes I think as entrepreneurs, we sort of forget that it is a stakeholder that it needs to win at the end. And you need to have the confidence that they will. So I'm not against fundraising. And you're right, I am considering fundraising in the future.
Interesting.
When we do fundraise, we want to be as certain as we can be that we will do that responsible and with the right partners and with the right vehicle. And we want to bring the investors the same value that we bring the consumers. And I think this is mostly a call to sort of the idea of entrepreneurship. I think as entrepreneurs, as an industry of entrepreneurs, we should be doing a little bit better because, we should be doing entrepreneurship for the right reason. And the foundation of entrepreneurship is value creation. That is it. It's not about a vague vision or a sort of unfaltering ambition. It's not about you getting rich. All of that byproducts. The core business, the core outcome of any entrepreneurship is to create value. And you have to do that for your workforce, for your customers, and for the investors. Because no one is obliged to fund your role play. It's a hard journey. It does have sacrifice, and it has to be done when you're ready and you're confident that you can convince people that you're here to create value for everybody, including them, the investor. So the quick answer is we were not ready. I didn't feel we were ready. I didn't think we proved ourselves enough in a difficult market to of enterprise health to go out with, a slide promising that we will dominate the world and this is how many billions that market is, and somehow I will be the one that conquers it. I think you need more than that.
Yeah.
I think we passed on a lot of the consumer ideas. Consumer sort of entrepreneurship to enterprise entrepreneurship, and I don't think it does apply. So this is the reason why we didn't, and equally this is the reason why at some point we will. We are currently in a few places, and we currently have one market is funding the next market in a different country, and that market now is funding a third market. But it does feel a bit slow now because inserting into a market, it certainly needs a lot of resources. So it's not doable, and but it will definitely be a little bit slower than if we had some investment. So maybe. So we do discuss, and as you said, I have been tempted a lot. I mean, you can imagine that. I'm sure you probably have as well. In 2020, 2021, with the pandemic, It was tempting. And we could see what was happening around us. We would see fundraising that is happening in ways that I never thought possible. And it was baffling at times to me. And I thought, well, why don't we jump on that? I don't know if we did make the right decision. I think the decision we did make to sort of hold steady, it did have some benefits. And I'm guessing I would never know the path not taken, right?
Exactly.
Well, not for 21, 22, 23. So it's a difficult question to answer, essentially. Why we didn't. These were my reasons, and essentially it wasn't. I think most of the leadership at Open Medical felt similarly, more or less. There were variations of that, and but we were all sort of essentially on the same page on that subject.
Yeah, I really want the listeners to take from this that, first of all, what you said there, that entrepreneurship is about creating value, and that includes creating value for investors. I think the way that we often talk about getting investment is like me getting investment. I get investment. We get investment. The company gets investment. And then we celebrate the investment. We do the press release of we've got 6 million, we've got 12 million, we've got 30 million. It's like you've got that on a promise of delivering some serious value to, as you've quite rightly pointed out, the patients, the market, the organizations, the customers, the investors themselves. And actually, it was a really interesting flip that you did there about like having empathy for the investors, asking yourself the question, can I create value for them? And it's funny that you say that, because whenever I'm asked, like, would you take on debt from the bank, or would you, let someone put £1 million in for blah, blah, blah. I've said similar things previously. Like, I need to feel really confident that I'm going to give them their money back and then some. Because I would hate the feeling, it would just burn a hole in me. Like the feeling of like debt to somebody that's backed me that I couldn't do. And that's why, like, I think it's a mindset thing as well. Like, I don't think I'm the right sort of personal mindset to actually raise money until it's so blatantly a good idea. Like I guess my bar for, I've talked this before, like my bar for a good idea is quite high, and actually sort of to my detriment when it comes to things like investment. I probably should be a bit more relaxed on it, but I'd probably take debt before I take equity anyway. But yeah, entrepreneurship is about creating value. And I think that is definitely something that people should take away. The other thing that I think is interesting here is you don't actually need to build $1 billion company to make a difference, first of all. To create value, it doesn't actually need to be $1 billion, first of all. And secondly, when it comes to taking investment, you're sort of committing to that. And I liked what you talked about, that those types of decisions come with sacrifice. They do, because all of a sudden, especially if you're on a fund with a 10-year clock, I know a lot of them are evergreen funds now that are, a lot longer horizon and stuff, but you're somewhat on the clock. You've now got really big goals and ambitions that you might have said to get the investment. Now you've got to truly believe it's going to happen and all these different things. Of course, everybody wants to create that value and all these different things, but it becomes a bit more real that actually this thing might get shut down if you don't now. Like, this might come off your hands now. There's lots of other things that you're bringing to the table. But to conclude this rambling thought on a reflection on what you've said, like, I like that what you've said is not don't take investment, because of course there are good things and bad things. What you've said is, here's a different framework to think about it. And you are someone who has gone full circle and is actually like, and now I'm thinking about it. And I think that's why I think your advice is credible here, right? Because like you don't have a don't take investment framework. You have a this is how I'm thinking about investment framework. And I just love the fact that your evidence that you don't need it. If you have your co-founders right, you've got a domain expert, you've got a technical expert, you're able to go fast in-house, you're able to, fail forwards and fail fast and all those different things very quickly because you've got the ability in-house. It's sweat equity, it's all those things. Your evidence that can work. And I think that, again, put another way, is evidence of how to get money at a better value, actually. because you've got those things in house and all these different things, and the way people look at it.
Absolutely. Look, James, what you say about, yes, investment in enterprises is good. We don't want to be in a leave where the only investment is speculative.
Absolutely.
I don't want people only investing in mortgages and crypto. We want productive investment.
Yes.
Right. So we do want people investing in enterprise.
Yes.
And I think this is where the interest rate and inflation situation, it makes it hard, because we absolutely do want that. But I think the investors are doing the right thing. I think the investors, they absolutely want to fund productive enterprise. I think it's the entrepreneurs that they need to understand that that's what they are.
Yeah.
They are productive enterprise. And it does come down to production. So I think the burden here is what is the narrative we give to entrepreneurs? And I think there has been a shift in the narrative that it is about lifestyle. Somehow, I've never seen that myself. Or it is about wealth. And I think this is what we need to change. I think entrepreneurs should go in willing to sacrifice, and they should take those bad odds themselves first before they ask other people to do. So I think we should position the risk a little bit better, because eventually that capital, it is absorbed out of a system, and it does skew the market. And I think it should be used better by enterprises. So, and that's why my message is to entrepreneurs and not really to investors, that we should, when we do ask for someone to become a partner, we need to be very clear what is the value we're going to bring them. And you might be $1 billion company. It doesn't stop you not being one, but you will have the focus on being $1 billion company instead of your next round.
Interesting.
And the press release, as you mentioned, is like the false metrics of success, right? This is the vanity metrics. How much I raised, or why is my head count, and all of that is great, but it has to come with other metrics. Why is your market momentum? What is your market share? What is your revenue? What is your profitability? What are your costs? And because if you only talk about what you raised and only talk about your headcount, is like the recent AI discussions when you talk about sensitivity and you leave the specificity out, is half the story.
Yes, quite.
Yes, I'm sorry. I mean, I might come across a little bit more sort of unforgiving.
Well, you'd be a tough man to get angel investment from, I think.
Yes, probably. I mean, I will. I will probably ask to go through your code repository. I'll probably see every line there.
I want to talk to you about Open Medical, Pathpoint. Obviously, we talked about the challenges of organic growth. We talked about some of the benefits of organic growth, that discipline, that efficiency mindset, the innovation mindset. We talked lots of different things. And obviously, you're now looking to do investment or potentially looking to do investments, get into other markets and things like that. What sort of scale have you achieved with Open Medical and with Pathpoint, by whatever metrics you determine are proper metrics of success, whether you want to talk about sites or you want to talk about revenues or you want to talk about headcount or whatever it is. But just to give people a flavor and a feel for how long has this journey been? Because it sounds very quick, actually, 3 years, or you've done a lot of growth in that time. Well, initially it was back in 20 something, but just talk to me about the growth and where you're at now and kind of the scale that you've achieved.
Yeah, so we started with essentially 4 hospitals. at the very beginning, of all allow London, and essentially is, people that I knew, and they came around as part of the soft rotation. We then we currently have, I think, 70 something instances out.
Oof.
So I think overall, probably serving 150 NHS sites. That is on the NHS side. We have a dozen on private. We are currently operating and we're expanding quite fast in Ireland, and we're launching our first soft solution in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia in March, and that will be a cluster solution which will serve about 14 hospitals. So this is our current folder. We do have some other we have a different pipeline, but this is the currently deployed solutions. I expect I think we're going to maintain a triple digit growth in 2024. We're moving more towards regional and national solution. I think currently there is a bit of a move of clinical operations, and how do you now share care and how you control clinical traffic across a full region with multiple hospitals. We're very well positioned to do that, technologically that is. So I think 2024 is going to be a busy year for us, looking at our current implementation pipeline. We currently, I can't complain. I think the growth is good. We thought we'd hit a point of saturation at some point, especially in some of the verticals. I was thinking we'd hit a saturation this year. It looks like we didn't. I think we will eventually hit a saturation. I mean, when you approach 70% of a certain market, it becomes very hard at that point to keep expanding on that. So we diversified, and we had to find different markets, and so we diversified in these three ways. We diversified in other verticals in terms of platform, diversified a little bit on regional care models. We diversified in private with pharma, medical devices, remote monitoring, drugs, and and we diversified to other markets altogether. I think out of all of those, the other markets is the hardest.
Yeah.
It's operational, it's logistically hard, it's expensive. We have to set up teams into other countries. The governance become a lot more challenging. We're running, we have to establish multiple data centers because we're highly regulated. And so there are logistical challenges and logistical costs. I think we're doing okay. We are increasing our head count. So I think last year we added probably about 20, 25 people. And I think next year, I don't think it's going to be less than that. I'm trying really hard to be as lean as possible, but it becomes not easy. And I mean, so we're revamping our people's framework, and, we're trying to govern workforce and productivity in a way. It's probably one of the most difficult problems to do in organic growth, and that is workforce management, productivity management, and because you have to maintain the highest level of productivity you can, while at the same time you give value back to that workforce, which is more than payroll, is progression, is skills, is careers. So, but we're slowly getting there. So, we put the framework out. We did a recent restructuring, which is mostly about governance, and we created a better path to leadership. The challenge I see in 2024, by the end of 2024. Strangely enough, I'm worried less about market growth, knowing the pipeline we have. I think our biggest challenge is scaling up leadership. I think we're getting to that point that we need to create more and more leadership, and this is probably a leadership journey. Being through it is not for everybody. It's not, not everybody has the appetite, and and for some people it's easier. For some people it might not be as easy, and unfortunately, I will need more leadership in the next 12 to 18 months. Hopefully, from internally. Hopefully, I want to see the leadership coming up from internally, but I have to be realistic, and I think we most likely end up with a hybrid of new leadership, both internally and externally. I just hope there will be mostly internally, but I'm trying. We're trying as much as we can to enable that, but is a multi-stakeholder game, and everybody has to play for that. And I think there are definitely some good examples there from the current work, from the current talent, but we'll see. I think when we meet in a year, I'll probably give you the breakdown of how much of that new leadership came was headhunted and how much was grown organically from the inside.
Yeah, I've just been hit with some recruiter fees that made me cringe a little bit. Yeah, getting people in the sort of mid higher levels is tough, and yeah, you're right. Growing them from within is much easier. I have just two more questions. First one, based on what you just said, the first one is, how do you deal with watching the money go out of the account every month at the level that you're at? When you see payroll go out every month, that must be quite eye-watering. Do you still feel attached to it as your money because it's your company, you've grown it organically? It's not investors' money, it's your money. You could quit tomorrow and take a lot of that kind of thing. So that's my first question. The second one is, do you practice medicine anymore?
Right, I'll start with the second because it's easy. I do, but I only do 1 day, so I'm still practicing. I know that might sound a little bit bizarre, but I found it as good escapism as well. I think it grounds me.
It's nice.
I think it does ground me. Have 1 day being on that floor, seeing the patients, and and eating my own food. Being a user. I think, and I'm keeping that. I think, as far as I can see, I don't see a reason not to. I have to sacrifice probably most of the weekend to essentially pay for that Friday.
Yeah.
But I think it's currently giving me a good ground that sometimes you lose as part of what we do. And so on the first question, it used to. So yes, it's interesting that when the payroll was 60,000 a month, it used to bother me a lot more, and it used to bother me a lot less when it goes to 350,000 a month and 400. So interestingly, there is a point that you feel that I have to let go. You have to let go. I see your point, and sometimes it's off, but I think in many ways is useful to focus on what's coming in, and it's healthier. I think it's also better for you as well to focus on what's coming in. What I would suggest is that my advice would be, one of the things we did early is we got a full-time accountant. So we're managing our own accounts. We're managing our own credit control as a full-time employee. I think that is invaluable. And I think it was after we were 15 people or so back in early 2020, when we got a full-time accountant, I say get full-time legal counsel. So the accountant and your legal counsel can start arranging your procurement mechanisms and make that make the way you're getting procured a little bit better. It will bring in some of that cash flow a little bit earlier, and that will allow you to utilize it for your next recruitment round.
Interesting.
HR, we go later. So we waited until we were, I think, probably 25, 30 people before we actually got an HR person, which then 5 people later, it became, we got a sort of assistant HR. So then now you have an HR team. And I think, so I think the best way, if you're organic, and is to really let go. You have to let go. You need to see your accounts as sort of your quiver of arrows, and arrows go out and arrows go in. And I think you need to become comfortable with that. If you have a good accountant with good, with good reporting, and they still explain to me, James, sometimes, they have to go through the cash flow and the accrual and the VAT account and all of that stuff. And at least now our accountants know that, I just, I'm a quite simple person on that. So I just want to know, are we making at least £1 more than we're spending? That's all I know. And are we having a good enough credit control so we're getting that pound sort of at least close to spending it?
Yes.
No, a year later.
Yes.
I mean, we do keep, like, you obviously, you need to have a capital, you need to be ahead on your cash flow as much as possible. I think this is probably, which is coming back a little bit to the investment, this is probably one of the things that investment would really, really help, or any type of fundraising, because what we currently have to do, we need to keep a reserve of 4 or 5 months. So this is capital that we keep because you can never be certain about your credit control. So you reserve that capital that is just sort of sitting there, so it can go out before new comes in. So that's where fundraising comes useful. So you release all that capital that is actually all profit sitting, sitting ahead as a reserve. But yeah, so good accountant and time eventually gets easier. I promise you.
Thank you. I'm glad you've picked up on the fact that I've asked that selfishly, because yes, dealing with payroll and then VAT and then it hurts, especially when you're sitting on 4 or 5 months.
I used to go to my app and check balance every day. I did. And I mean, the balance is not going to change. I mean, you could just check after your payroll, right? But you can't reconcile that. You stress. You think, okay, I need to make sure everything gets paid. And so you need to check that balance every day, as if it's going to evaporate. And slowly
I feel so seen. I feel so seen in this conversation.
I know. Look, I think most people go through that journey, and it's, as we said, closing that, what we said at the beginning, that is more of a identity journey than anything. And I think it's up to us as entrepreneurs how we form that identity as we develop it, how we mold it through that journey. And whether that would be with fundraising or without fundraising, how do we shape the identity we develop? Because this is the type of enterprise we will run at the end.
What a beautiful way to end, I think, Harry. This has been an absolute pleasure. A masterclass, I think, in how to consider fundraising, whether you are fundraising or whether you're not, whether you want to go for that with a co-founder, and how to get the best valuation on your money. And Yeah, I think it's been an absolute pleasure. We didn't even get to talk about AI. That's how valuable this conversation was for an hour and 16 minutes. But I'm sure I can get you back on.
Maybe
to talk
next
about
time. I have a lot to say about AI.
I don't doubt that you do. In fact, let's definitely bring you on to talk about that because I want to hear those opinions. But yeah, Harry, as I say, absolute pleasure for coming on. Thank you. I really appreciate it. It's so nice to have the other side of the coin there, just the other view of someone that's built a tech company selling to healthcare organizations that hasn't raised money, has managed to bootstrap the entire way. It's come with problems. It's come with advantages. Ultimately, there's no right or wrong answer, but you've given us all a framework in how to understand it a little bit better. So for that, I appreciate you. Thank you for coming on. If people want to learn more about Open Medical, Pathpoint, yourself, what's the best way for them to do so?
So I think we are quite active on LinkedIn, so please follow us there. And I have to say our web designer would be very keen if you go to www.openmedical.co.uk and subscribe to our newsletter. And our copywriter would be equally thankful because they're doing some good work.
Superb. Harry, thank you so much.